This is the eastern shore of Virginia, a sliver of land suspended between the vast Atlantic and the Chesapeake Bay. It is a place of quiet beauty, a place that feels set apart. Its oldest name, given by its first inhabitants, tells you everything you need to know. Accawmacke, the land beyond the waters, the other side of Water Place. For centuries, this land was home to the Accomac people. Their story is written in the names of its counties and its creeks. But the people themselves have seemingly vanished. What happened to the people from the other side of the water? This is the story of the Accawmacke, a story of shrewd diplomacy, of devastating loss, and of a survival that has been systematically denied. It is the story of the first Native American tribe to be legally terminated by the United States, and of a paper genocide that sought to erase them from history. But it is also a story of resilience, of a people whose legacy endures in the land and in the descendants who are still fighting to reclaim their name. Before the first English ships sailed into the Chesapeake in 1607, the eastern shore was the domain of the Accawmacke. They were an Algonquian-speaking people, part of the great Powhatan Confederacy that dominated coastal Virginia. Their society, like that of their mainland relatives, was matrilineal. Power and property passed through the mother's line. Life was governed by the rhythm of the seasons. The peninsula was said to be scarce in deer, so the Accawmacke relied heavily on the bounty of the bay and their gardens for survival. Corn was their most vital crop, supplemented by fishing and gathering. Politically, the Accawmacke occupied a unique position. While they paid tribute to Powhatan, they were considered to be on the ethnic fringe of his empire. The vast expanse of the Chesapeake was more than water. It was a political shield. This geographic isolation meant Powhatan's control was not as complete as it was over mainland tribes, granting the Accawmacke a degree of autonomy their mainland cousins could never possess. This independence would prove to be the cornerstone of their strategy for survival in a world about to be turned upside down. When Captain John Smith arrived on the eastern shore in 1608, he was met not with hostility, but with diplomacy. The leader of the Accawmacke was a man named Debedevon, a chief so friendly and welcoming that the English nicknamed him the Laughing King. Debedevon was a shrewd political operator. He seems to have immediately recognized the power of the English and the futility of direct confrontation. Instead of war, he chose alliance. He granted land to the English interpreter Thomas Savage, forging a personal connection that would become a vital channel of communication. This relationship was not merely one of friendship, it was a calculated political maneuver. By positioning his people as allies and informants, Debedevon secured a level of protection and preferential treatment that mainland tribes did not receive. It was a sophisticated strategy of playing rival powers against each other for his people's survival. That strategy was put to the ultimate test in 1621. Opechancanough, the new and more militant leader of the Powhatan Confederacy, was secretly planning a massive, coordinated strike against the English settlements. His plan required a potent poison made from the water hemlock plant, which grew in abundance on the eastern shore. He sent emissaries to the Accawmacke, demanding their participation and their poison. Debedevon refused. In a decision that would forever alter the fate of his people, he not only denied Opechancanough the weapon, but also revealed the entire plot to the English through Thomas Savage. On March 22, 1622, Opechancanoug's warriors attacked, killing nearly a third of the English colonists in a single day. Jamestown itself was saved only because of the warning. The attack ignited a brutal, decade-long war on the mainland. But on the other side of the water, the Accawmacke remained at peace. Their alliance with the English now sealed in blood, not their own, but that of their former Confederates. In recognition of their loyalty, the Virginia colony established a 1,500-acre reservation for the Accawmacke in 1640. By this time, the tribe had become known as the Jingiskin. This land grant was meant to protect them from the relentless encroachment of English settlers. But the colonists' hunger for land was insatiable. In response, the Genghis Khan adopted a novel strategy for survival. They took their English neighbors to court. Throughout the 17th century, the Genghis Khan people used the colonial legal system, filing lawsuits in the Northampton County courts to protect their treaty lands from illegal settlement. It was a remarkable adaptation, an attempt to use the invaders' own rules against them. But this legal assimilation was a double-edged sword. While it offered a venue for protest, it also forced the Genghis Khan to accept English definitions of land ownership, slowly eroding their own traditions. Their successes were limited. By 1680, their reservation had been officially reduced to just 650 acres. The legal system they had turned to for protection was slowly becoming a tool of their dispossession. Over the next century, the world of the Genghis Khan continued to shrink. Disease and constant pressure from colonists caused their population to dwindle. On the isolated eastern shore, they found themselves sharing a social landscape with another marginalized group, a large and growing population of free African Americans. Naturally, the two communities began to intermarry. But what was a natural social development was seen by their white neighbors as a threat. Petitions began to flow to the Virginia General Assembly with a new and insidious argument. The people on the reservation were no longer real Indians. They were, the petitioners claimed, mulattoes or free Negroes masquerading as Indians to hold on to their land. This was not a simple observation. It was a political weapon. By redefining the Genghis Khan people's racial identity, white colonists sought to invalidate their legal status as Indians, and with it, their treaty rights to the reservation. The final push came in the early 1800s. Fueled by fears of a slave revolt and racial mixing, white trustees appointed to manage the reservation petitioned the Virginia General Assembly to dissolve it entirely. In 1813, the Assembly passed the law. The Genghis Khan Reservation, the oldest in Virginia, was officially terminated. The communal land was divided into 27 small plots and deeded to the remaining families. This was more than a local tragedy. The 1813 law that destroyed the Genghis Khan Reservation was the first act of legal tribal termination in the history of the United States. The strategy used here, redefining a tribe racially to nullify their treaty rights, then breaking up their communal land into private parcels to make it easier to acquire, created a devastating blueprint. It was a legal experiment on the Eastern Shore that would be perfected and deployed against Native American nations across the continent for the next century. Even after the termination, most Genghis Khan families clung to their small allotments. For nearly 2 decades, they held on. But in 1831, a slave rebellion in Southampton County, led by Nat Turner, sent a shockwave of terror through white Virginia. On the isolated Eastern Shore, the panic was acute. In the aftermath, a surge of land purchases by frightened whites finally displaced the last of the Genghis Khan landowners. The compact community that had existed for centuries was shattered. By 1850, every acre of the original reservation was in white hands. The land was gone. A century later, the state of Virginia would try to erase the memory. The architect of this erasure was one man, Dr. Walter Ashby Plecker, the state's Registrar of Vital Statistics from 1912 to 1946. A fervent believer in the pseudoscience of eugenics, he was obsessed with the idea of white racial purity. He was the driving force behind Virginia's 1924 Racial Integrity Act, a law that officially recognized only 2 races, white and colored. The law contained a bizarre clause that became known as the Pocahontas exception, allowing elite Virginians to claim a distant mythical native ancestry, no more than 1/16, and still be considered white. This exception served a perverse function. By romanticizing a dead Indian past for the white elite, it simultaneously delegitimized the living indigenous communities of the present. Armed with this law, Pleke began what can only be described as a paper genocide. He sent letters to county clerks and local registrars across Virginia, warning them against registering anyone as Indian. In a 1943 letter, he stated his belief plainly. Public records indicate that there does not exist today a descendant of Virginia ancestors claiming to be an Indian who is unmixed with Negro blood. To him, any living person claiming to be Indian was, by definition, colored. He compiled lists of family surnames he deemed to be of mixed Negroid ancestry and circulated them to officials, instructing them to deny these families Indian status. He retroactively altered birth certificates, marriage licenses, and census records, systematically erasing the word Indian and replacing it with colored.
The effect was devastating, creating a gap in the official record that has made it nearly impossible for many Virginia tribes to prove the continuous existence required for federal recognition. Today, the descendants of the Accawmacke still live on the eastern shore, their history preserved in family names and oral traditions, but their public identity remains a battleground. In Maryland, the state-recognized Accawmacke Indian tribe claims Accomac ancestry, a claim disputed by historians and other tribes. In Virginia, the American indigenous Accawmacke Indians are fighting for recognition and the return of their ancestral lands. In 2021, Accawmacke descendant Lisa Cypress filed a federal lawsuit against Northampton County, seeking the return of Indiantown Park, land that was once the heart of the Jingaskin Reservation. The lawsuit brings the story of the Accawmacke full circle. 400 years ago, they walked into colonial courtrooms to defend their land. Today, their descendants are walking into federal courtrooms to reclaim it, using the very deeds and plats created to dispossess them as evidence of their rightful heritage. It is an unbroken, centuries-long struggle for justice, fought on the shifting battleground of the American legal system. The story of the Accawmacke is not a story of a people who vanished. It is the story of a people who were vanished, on paper, in courtrooms, and in law books. From the first tribal termination in American history to a 20th century paper genocide, their identity was systematically attacked and legally erased. Yet the people from the other side of the water endure. Their legacy is etched into the landscape of the Eastern Shore, and their story, a powerful testament to survival against all odds, is finally being reclaimed.